Welcome to today's story of survival, hope, and resilience. In a world where everything seems lost and humanity is on the brink of extinction, there are always those who rise from the ashes, determined to rebuild. This is the story of the survivors who built a new world from the ruins of the old. As the last remnants of civilization crumble, it's up to a group of brave survivors to fight through unimaginable odds and create something new, something that defies the chaos. But the path to rebuilding the world isn't easy. It's filled with dangers, both from the infected hordes that roam the land and the betrayals that can come from those closest to you. Before we dive into the heart-pounding action, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell icon so you never miss out on these incredible stories of survival. Now, let's step into the ruins of the old world and witness the rise of the new one. The sun barely peeked through the thick, gray clouds as the survivors moved cautiously through the abandoned city. Once a thriving metropolis, it was now nothing more than a shadow of its former self. The towering skyscrapers were crumbling, their glass windows shattered, and the streets were eerily silent except for the occasional rustle of wind against broken debris. Isaac, the leader of this ragtag group, moved at the front, his eyes scanning the ruins ahead. His mind was always calculating, always on the lookout for danger. The world had changed in ways no one could have anticipated, but one thing remained constant: the fight for survival. Behind him, Lena, a fierce and resourceful woman, carried a large bag of supplies. Her sharp eyes were constantly scanning their surroundings, and her hand rested lightly on the hilt of the machete at her side. She wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. After everything they had been through, fear was a distant memory. The group consisted of only a handful of people now, most of them survivors of a world torn apart by a zombie apocalypse. But there was hope among them, a glimmer that refused to fade. They had learned to survive, to adapt, and to trust each other in a world where betrayal could be deadly. Isaac stopped in front of an old, decrepit convenience store. The glass doors were shattered, the shelves overturned. It looked like it had been looted long ago. Still, they needed to search. Anything useful could mean the difference between life and death. "We'll split up," Isaac instructed, his voice low and steady. "Lena, take the back. Check the alley for any supplies or survivors. Sam, you're with me. We'll check inside." Sam, a young man with a grim expression, nodded and followed Isaac inside the store. The stale air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of decay hung in the air. The shelves were empty, save for a few old cans of food that had long since expired. Sam moved cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the silent space. "Anything?" Isaac asked, his voice tense. Sam shook his head. "Nothing but old junk." Isaac cursed under his breath. They were running out of time. The infected could be anywhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce. They couldn't afford to linger in places like this for long. As they moved through the store, a sudden noise from outside caught their attention. It was the sound of a distant groan, followed by the unmistakable shuffle of feet. "Zombies," Isaac muttered, gripping his rifle tightly. "Get ready." They quickly moved to the back of the store, where Lena had been checking the alley. She was already there, her machete in hand, her eyes scanning the street for movement. The groans grew louder, and the shuffle of feet became more distinct. It wasn't just one or two zombies. There was a horde approaching. "We need to move now," Lena said, her voice urgent. Isaac nodded, and they quickly formed a plan. Their best chance of survival was to make it to a nearby building that still had some structural integrity. It would be a risk, but they couldn't stay here. The horde was too close. As they sprinted toward the building, the noise of the zombies grew louder. Isaac could feel the weight of the rifle in his hands, but he knew it wasn't just the weapons that would keep them alive. It was their ability to think, to stay calm, and to trust each other. They reached the building, a half-collapsed office tower, just as the first of the zombies staggered into view. The survivors ducked inside, their hearts pounding in their chests. Isaac held up his hand, signaling for silence. The group huddled together, holding their breath as the zombies wandered past the entrance. For a moment, it seemed like the group was safe, but they all knew it wouldn't last long. The zombies were getting smarter. They were adapting, learning how to track them, how to hunt them. Stay quiet, Isaac whispered. We wait for them to move on. Once they do, we head for the roof. We'll have a better vantage point from there. The group nodded, huddling together in the dark, waiting for the danger to pass. But as they waited, Isaac couldn't shake the feeling that this time, things were different. The zombies were getting closer, and they were running out of places to hide. The world outside was no longer the one they had known, and the fight for survival had just become even more deadly. The silence inside the ruined office tower was heavier than the shadows that filled every corner. Dust particles floated in the stale air, undisturbed except by the shallow breaths of the survivors. Isaac crouched near a shattered window frame, peering down into the street below where the horde of zombies slowly shuffled past. Their groans were low and constant like a swarm of insects humming just beyond reach. Lena sat beside him, her grip firm on the machete resting across her knees. Sam leaned against the wall further back, his eyes fixed on the door they had barricaded moments before with old office furniture and pieces of a broken vending machine. No one spoke. They knew what was at stake. Sound was death, and one mistake would bring it crashing through the walls. Minutes passed slowly and the groans began to fade, replaced by the distant echoes of moaning drifting further away. Isaac finally gave a signal with his hand. They stood slowly, every movement careful and deliberate. We make for the roof, he whispered softly. There's a chance for a better view, maybe a safer path out. Stairs were their only option. The elevator shaft was unusable, its doors pried open and its cables long snapped by time and decay. They moved in a single file, Isaac first, Lena behind him, Sam at the rear. Every creak of the rusted stairwell sent a wave of anxiety through their bodies. Halfway up the building, a sudden crash from below froze them in place. Isaac's eyes narrowed. That was no zombie. A zombie didn't move with that kind of force. Sam glanced down the stairwell. That was metal hitting metal. Someone's here. Isaac signaled silence again. They continued upward, faster now, silent steps leading them to the top floor. When they burst onto the roof, the cold air hit them like a slap in the face. The city stretched out before them, a ghostly skeleton of what once was. The streets were cracked, buildings gutted, vehicles overturned and charred. The only sign of life was the slow creeping fog of ash that rolled through the streets like smoke without fire. From this height Isaac could see the horde moving past the block below, but what caught his attention was something else in the distance. Past the edge of the city he saw lights, not fire, not torches, actual electric light, faint and flickering but unmistakable. You see that, he said, pointing beyond the horizon. Lena squinted, eyes widened. That's power. Could be a generator, maybe a settlement. Or a trap, Sam said grimly. Could be raiders baiting survivors. Either way, it's the first sign of anything, Isaac replied. We need to know what it is. As night fell they took shelter on the roof, using scraps of tarp and old boards to create a small cover. Fire was out of the question. Food was rationed. Lena divided a half can of beans between them. Isaac refused his portion, giving it to Sam who needed it more. Sleep came in short bursts filled with dreams of screams and blood. Isaac woke before dawn, the sky barely lit by the rising sun. He stared out at the distant lights still glowing like hope in the darkness. We head out at first light, he told them when they stirred. If it's safe we have a chance, if not we'll deal with it. The journey across the city was treacherous. Every street was a battlefield of memory, twisted by time and destruction. Hollow cars became death traps, alleyways held the scent of rot and decay. They moved fast, sticking to shadows, ducking behind wreckage. Lena's instincts kept them alive more than once, her senses tuned to every sound, every movement. Sam kept quiet, absorbing everything. They avoided the main road, staying off the radar of both the undead and the living, because it wasn't just the zombies that posed a threat. Isaac had seen what desperation did to people he had once trusted, a man who later led a group that burned an entire camp to the ground just for a barrel of clean water. By midday they had crossed the city's heart and found themselves near the edge where the buildings became shorter and the forest began again. That's where they saw the first sign, a tall wooden wall made from salvaged cars, fencing, metal and tree trunks. It was crude but strong, and behind it were watchtowers manned by people with rifles. Isaac crouched behind a bus, peering at the settlement. There were people, real people, walking, talking, moving like they weren't constantly fearing death. They've built something, Lena said softly. She sounded like she didn't quite believe it. We have to approach carefully, Isaac said. No sudden moves, no weapons drawn. They moved forward, hands raised, showing they weren't a threat. A warning shot rang out, cracking into the concrete in front of them. A voice shouted from above. State your names and intentions. Isaac called out his name, followed by Lena and Sam. We're survivors looking for shelter. We have no disease, no bites, no blood. A pause. The guards conferred, one of them a woman with a scar running down her cheek signaled to someone on the ground. A moment later the heavy gate creaked open. Come in slowly, weapons down. The survivors entered and were immediately surrounded. Their weapons were taken and a man in his 40s with a thick beard stepped forward. He wore a leather jacket patched together with metal plates and carried a shotgun on his back. Name's Carter. I run this place. What do you want? Just shelter, Isaac said quietly. A place to rest, maybe help rebuild. Carter studied them. We don't take in everyone, only those who prove their worth. You'll work for your place, you cause problems, you leave, or you get put down. Fair, Isaac said. They were led deeper into the camp. It was more organized than it looked from the outside. People were farming in raised beds made from old bathtubs. Kids were playing with scavenged toys. Water was being filtered through makeshift purifiers. There was hope here, but it was fragile. Carter's right-hand woman, the one with the scar named Riva, gave them a tour. This settlement started a year ago, she said. After a massive horde passed through the east, some of us escaped, found each other, started building, had to kill more than a few monsters to get here. Not all of them were infected. Sam asked quietly, what about the zombies? They stay away. Not always, Riva said. We've got alarms, barriers, guards, but they're changing, getting faster, getting smarter. One of ours got attacked last week, said it looked right at him like it recognized him. Isaac felt a chill. That night the group slept in a tent set up for newcomers. They had food, warmth, safety, but Isaac didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling of the tent, thinking of the lights, thinking of how much had already been lost. Outside the camp, beyond the reach of the fences, something moved in the dark, something that didn't groan or shuffle, something that watched. And waited. Tomorrow would bring answers or more questions. But tonight they were alive. And for now that was enough. The morning came quietly, the sun rising over the remnants of the city, casting a faint golden light on the settlement. Isaac awoke with a start, his senses on high alert. He had barely slept, the weight of their situation pressing down on him like a heavy stone. He sat up in the small tent they had been given, rubbing his eyes, his mind racing with thoughts of the camp, the people inside, and what they had witnessed the night before. Sam was already awake, his face grim as he looked out the flap of the tent at the walls of the settlement. Lena was still sleeping, her exhaustion finally catching up with her. Isaac moved quietly, not wanting to disturb her. He had a feeling that something was off about this place, and it wasn't just the uneasy way the guards had looked at them when they entered. There was something more, something lurking beneath the surface. He stood, his boots crunching softly on the dirt as he stepped outside. The air was crisp, the wind carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and earth. The camp was bustling with activity as people moved about, tending to the crops, repairing equipment, and working together to keep the settlement running. It looked like a small slice of normalcy in a world gone mad. But Isaac couldn't shake the feeling that this was just a facade, a fragile shell that could crack at any moment. Isaac, a voice called from behind him. He turned to see Carter walking toward him, his expression unreadable. Can we talk? Isaac nodded and followed him to a small, makeshift shelter near the edge of the camp. Carter lowered his voice, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. I've been watching you, Carter said. You're not like the others. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and I can see that you're thinking. Isaac didn't respond immediately, unsure of where this conversation was heading. He crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on the ground. You're right to be cautious, Carter continued. But let me be clear with you. This camp, it's not what it seems. We've got food, we've got water, we've got safety. But it's not enough. Not anymore. Isaac raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? There's something out there, Carter said, his voice lowering even further. Something worse than the zombies. Something that's been hunting us. The infected have always been a problem, but this is different. Isaac felt a chill run down his spine. He had known from the moment he saw the settlement that there was something off about it, but hearing Carter's words only confirmed his suspicions. He had to know more. What are you talking about? Isaac asked, his voice steady despite the growing unease in his chest. Carter hesitated, then looked over his shoulder one more time before continuing. Before the zombies took over, this area was home to a military research facility. They were working on something. Something dangerous. And I think it's still out there. Carter paused, his eyes narrowing as if seeing something in the distance. I've been to the outskirts of the facility. It's a wasteland now, but there are signs that someone or something is still there. The infected are getting smarter, faster, and they're working together. Isaac's mind raced. He had seen how the zombies had evolved, how they had changed since the outbreak. They weren't just mindless creatures anymore. They were adapting, learning, becoming more dangerous with every passing day. So what does that mean for us? Isaac asked, his voice low. It means we need to act fast, Carter replied. We can't stay here forever. The horde will eventually find us. And if the infected are getting smarter, then we need to be ready for whatever comes next. I'm not sure how much time we have, but we need to figure out what's going on at that facility. We need to stop it before it's too late. Isaac's eyes narrowed. He had seen the devastation the zombies had caused. But if there was something worse out there, something more intelligent, more strategic, then they had no time to waste. Where is it? Isaac asked. It's about a day's walk from here, through the old industrial district, Carter said. It's risky, but we have to know what we're up against. You and your group, you're the best chance we've got. Isaac didn't hesitate. He knew what had to be done. I'll go. But I'm not going alone. I'll take Lena and Sam with me. We'll leave at first light. Carter nodded. I'll give you what you need. Weapons, supplies, whatever you need to make it through. Isaac turned to leave but paused. One more thing, Carter. If we find something that can help us fight back, we'll come back for you. But if this turns out to be something bigger than we're ready for, we won't be able to save everyone. Carter looked him in the eye. I understand. Just get the job done. With that, Isaac returned to the camp to gather Lena and Sam. He explained the plan to them, and although they were hesitant, they agreed without question. They knew that this was the only chance they had to truly make a stand, to find out what was driving the evolution of the infected and, hopefully, put an end to it. The next morning, they set out at dawn, leaving the safety of the settlement behind. They traveled quickly, sticking to the shadows and avoiding any encounters with the zombies that still roamed the streets. The industrial district was close, but the path was fraught with danger. By midday, they reached the outskirts of the facility. It was an imposing structure, a fortress of steel and concrete that had once been a symbol of human progress. Now it was a monument to their downfall. Isaac, Lena, and Sam approached cautiously, their eyes scanning every corner, every broken window. The building was eerily silent, but Isaac knew better than to let his guard down. This wasn't a place for hesitation. They moved inside, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. The air was thick with dust, and the faint scent of chemicals still lingered, a reminder of the horrors that had been unleashed here. Keep your eyes open, Isaac whispered. We don't know what's waiting for us. They continued deeper into the facility, their hearts racing with every turn. They had come to stop the threat, but they weren't sure if they were too late. And then, from the shadows, something moved. The air inside the facility was stifling, thick with the smell of decay and chemicals. Every step echoed down the long, deserted corridors, but there was no sign of life, human or infected. The silence was oppressive, the kind that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end, as if something was waiting, watching. Isaac's grip on his rifle tightened. He knew they were close to something. They could feel it, like a pressure building in the air. Lena moved silently beside him, her machete drawn, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Sam stayed close behind, his rifle ready, his face grim. They had come this far, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead gnawed at them. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about uncovering the truth, stopping whatever was driving the evolution of the infected, and maybe, just maybe, finding a way to end the nightmare. Isaac's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden sound, a low hiss followed by a soft click. He froze, motioning for the others to stop. His senses were on high alert now, every nerve firing. Something was moving ahead of them, and it wasn't a zombie. Stay close, Isaac whispered. The group continued forward, slower this time, their movements more cautious. They had to be smart about this. The facility was vast, filled with darkened rooms and narrow hallways. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and Isaac wasn't about to walk into one without being prepared. Then, as they rounded a corner, they saw it. The door ahead of them was slightly ajar, the faint glow of light spilling out from the crack. Isaac gestured for Lena and Sam to stay back as he approached the door, his footsteps silent on the cold concrete floor. He reached for the handle, pausing just a moment before pushing the door open. Inside, the room was a laboratory. It was eerily pristine, almost untouched by the destruction that had overtaken the world outside. Desks were covered with papers, monitors blinked with static, and strange vials and syringes sat neatly arranged on metal shelves. But it wasn't the lab that caught their attention. It was the figure standing in the center of the room. A man, or what was left of him. He was strapped to a chair, his head hanging limp, but his eyes were wide open, filled with an unnatural, almost mechanical focus. His skin was pale, stretched tight over his bones, and he was hooked up to various machines that beeped and hummed. In front of him was a large glass tank, filled with a strange liquid that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Isaac stepped forward cautiously, his eyes fixed on the man. "What the hell is this?" he murmured. Lena leaned in, her face pale. This isn't just a survivor. He's been experimented on." Isaac's heart sank as he scanned the room. The man wasn't just a victim of the apocalypse, he was part of it. A test subject in whatever twisted experiments had been conducted here before the outbreak. But what had they been trying to accomplish? Sam stepped forward, his expression grim. This is what Carter was talking about. The research facility. They were trying to make something worse. Isaac nodded. It was clear now. The infected weren't just mindless creatures. They were part of a larger experiment, a project to create something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. And it had worked. "We need to find out what they were doing here," Isaac said, his voice steady despite the horror of what they had uncovered. He moved to the nearby desk, rifling through papers, scanning anything that might give him some answers. His eyes landed on a set of blueprints, plans for a Project Omega. The words were hastily scribbled across the top, but the details beneath were clear. The project had involved manipulating the genetic structure of the infected, experimenting with their DNA, making them faster, smarter, more organized. Isaac's breath caught in his throat. They had created an army of infected that could think, plan, and strategize. This wasn't just a horde. This was something far more dangerous, something capable of wiping out what little remained of humanity. "We need to shut this place down," Isaac said, his voice low but resolute. "If they've been breeding these things, we can't let it continue." Lena nodded in agreement, her eyes hardening. "We'll destroy everything. The research, the equipment, everything." But before they could act, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside. The sound of heavy footsteps followed, and then, from the shadows, a figure appeared. It wasn't a zombie, not entirely. It was one of them, but different. The creature was tall, its limbs long and sinewy, its skin an ashen gray. It moved with purpose, its eyes glowing faintly, sharp intelligence flickering in its gaze. It didn't shuffle like the typical infected. It stalked, as if it understood the group was a threat. Isaac raised his rifle instinctively, but the creature was faster. It lunged, its clawed hands swiping through the air with a speed that defied anything they had seen before. Isaac fired, the bullet tearing through the air, but the creature dodged it with unnatural agility. Lena reacted first, charging forward with her machete raised high. She swung at the creature, but it caught her blade mid-air, its strength overpowering her. She grunted, struggling to pull free, but the creature held tight, its grip like iron. Sam fired his rifle, hitting the creature in the chest, but it didn't even flinch. It let out a low growl, its eyes narrowing, as if calculating its next move. Isaac knew they were outmatched. This wasn't just an infected. This was a new breed, something born from the horrors of this facility. and they had no idea what else might be lurking in the darkness. "Run!" Isaac shouted, grabbing Lena by the arm and pulling her away from the creature's grasp. They retreated down the hallway, the creature hot on their heels. They didn't know how much time they had before it caught up with them, but they had no choice. They had to escape, and fast. As they sprinted down the corridor, Isaac's mind raced. This facility was more than just a research center, it was a breeding ground for something far worse. And the world outside was about to face the consequences. They burst through a door at the far end of the hallway, finding themselves back in the open space of the facility's main atrium. The air was thick with dust, and the faint hum of machines filled the silence. But there was no time to stop. They needed to get out. "We're not done yet," Isaac said, determination in his eyes. "We'll come back for this. We'll make sure it ends." But deep down, he knew they were just beginning to understand the true scope of the disaster. The infected were no longer just a threat to their survival. They were evolving, adapting, and soon, nothing would be safe. Thank you for following the survivors who built a new world from the ruins of the old. The journey continues, and the fight is far from over. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more action-packed survival stories.